Welcome to the sixth class in the study of the third chapter of the Yoga Sutras. This chapter is called the Vibhūti Pādaḥ. So last time we stopped at the sutra, Hridaye Chitta Samvit, which means by performing saṃyama on Hridayam, which is the heart. Chitta Samvit, samvit means to know, samvit means knowing completely, some means for all, equally, from all angles, So it says, by performing saṃyama on the heart, knowledge of the chitta thoroughly is obtained. So at this point, Sanjana asked me a question: what is meant by knowledge of the chitta? So, and as you know, chitta is one of the components of the mind. In yoga, the mind is divided into four portions: mano, buddhi, ahankara, and chitta. Chitta is the closest link to the consciousness. So chittiva bhavayati chittam. And the example, we've seen this many, many times, so I'm not going to put up the slide again, but the example is that of a movie theater. In the yoga and as well as in Vedanta, so the consciousness is analogous to a light in a movie theater. Okay, so chitta is essentially the movie theater of the mind. The movie theater, you can say the movie theater screen, or just the movie theater of the mind. Okay, so Sanjana asked me, what do you mean by saṃyama on the movie theater? I was going to say, okay, it means just looking at the screen of your mind and trying to understand what goes on. Or essentially, you're essentially staring at the screen of a movie, which is what we do all the time, right? There's images played, but what is the significance? So I realized there's something more to that than just saying by doing saṃyama on the hridayam, the knowledge of the chitta is obtained. So I went and looked into Swami Hariharananda's explanation thoroughly, and he quotes something that is very profound. So Swami Hariharananda says, the sutra is a very important sutra. Why is it important? Because it's a bridge sutra. So when he says, Patañjali says, saṃyama on the mind, it means there's something observing the mind. So it prepares the yogi for the deeper discrimination, which is this mind, even in its subtlest and most luminous form, is still an object. There is something that is observing the mind. I, the seer, am different from it. Okay, so the next sutra moves from knowledge of the chitta to knowledge concerning Puruṣa. Remember, these are all saṃyama. Saṃyama means you don't just melt into samadhi, you kind of, it's like a bucket fetching water from a well. So you go between dharana, dhyana, and samadhi to view the mind from different angles and get all the information you want. So this sequence is significant. First, the yogi knows the mind. Then the yogi sees the mind is not the self, because you are observing the mind. Then the distinction between buddhi sattva and Puruṣa becomes possible. Well, the intellect, it's called buddhi sattva because it's the mind in its like purest form. Okay, so and then Patanjali says, what exactly does the yogi come to know? So this is Sanjana's question. Ordinary cognition of lay people is, I am angry, I like this person. That's ordinary cognition. Through Chitta Samvita, the yogi sees the inner mechanics in slow motion. So what happens? There's a perception. So the mind thinks about something. It's a perception. It triggers a samskara. Samskara is the impression. So it does a pattern matching. When you see something, it immediately there is a pattern matching with existing experience. So it triggers a samskara. And if this person, if you know you like it, then it creates pleasant sensations in the mind. What happens? The mind colors the perception as good, pleasant, and unpleasant, everything. Then what happens? The ego appropriates the experiences as I am having a good experience, I am having a miserable experience, and then the buddhi has judged it. This is bad experience, I don't want this. The buddhi has judged it. And then what happens? The gunas are churning, and this leaves further samskaras. So the yogi sees this entire pattern. Okay, that's what's happening in here. So this is for those who studied Vedanta. This is called vritti vyapti and phala vyapti. So in the terms of modern AI, this question is actually a very important question. So everybody is asking, AI is very intelligent. What is the difference between intelligence and consciousness? Machines can do great things, but can they have this can they ever get the first-hand subjective experiences? Like, I am experiencing, I feel happy. Can they ever get that? So for that, this is explained in yoga and Vedanta very well. So especially in Vedanta, they call it what is called the vritti vyapti, vishayakara vritti, and purushakara vritti. So vritti is just a mental modification. The way Vedanta, or for that matter yoga, talk about the mind is, the mind itself is inert. So just like a machine working, all those, when you see an object, the mind colors it, which means, so let's say you see an ox. The mind, in the mind, there's an impression created of an ox. And then what happens? This is a mechanical process. It's called vritti vyapti. Just vritti is just action. Vritti is just a modification of the mind that is happening. Then phala vyapti, palam, the fruit of that, when the consciousness shines on that, various details are revealed. That is not there in in this AI system. So that's a important distinction. Okay. So, and then why the hridaya? The heart, is treated as a subtle center associated with the essence and the inner life of a person, which is why we showed the Buddhist monks example. When they were hooked up with electrodes in the head, they started laughing because they said the mind is here in the heart. Okay, next we'll move on to the next sutra, knowledge of the Puruṣa. This is actually a very important sutra. Sattva Purushayo atyanta sankirtnayo pratyaya vishesho bhoga paratatvat swartha saṃyamat purusha jnanam. So it's a long sutra. Let's analyze what it's saying. Very important sutra. Experience. Bhoga means experience. Okay. Bhoga is experience. Experience of what? Anything, pleasure, pain, a whole gamut of experiences arises because Bodhisattva and Purusha, though utterly distinct, are not distinguished in cognition. So, Sattva Purushayo, Sattva. Sattvam is a refined quality, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. What is the embodiment of sattva in the mind? That is the purest form of the mind, the intellect in its purest form. That is called sattva. The mind in its purest form is the sattvic mind. That is still, it's called sattva. Okay, Patañjali uses this several times in the Yoga Sūtras. Sattva Purushayo means of the sattva and Purusha. Atyanta asamkirnayo. So here it becomes atyanta asamkirna becomes atyanta samkirna. Atyanta samkirna. So ati anta means extreme, very, even though they are utterly unmixed. Samkirna means mixed, asamkirna means unmixed. So what it says is the mind in its purest form and the Purusha are completely distinct. Unmixed means they're utterly distinct. So he uses two negatives. Samkirnayo. Samkirna is mixed up. Samkirna is not mixed up. So which means very distinct. But pratyaya avishesho, so it becomes pratyaya avishesho becomes pratyaya vishesho when you write it in Sanskrit. So their vishesham means special, distinction. They are not distinguished in cognition. Pratyaya is the cognition that happens, the contents of the movie. It's all blurred, frame by frame, looks like a flowing sequence. So they are not distinguished in cognition, resulting in confusion. Since buddhi exists for another by saṃyama on that which exists for itself, knowledge concerning Puruṣa arises. So if you look at the sutra, it looks like a cliche. By saṃyama on Puruṣa, you get the knowledge of the Puruṣa. Essentially, that's what it's saying. You agree with me? By swartha, since buddhi exists for another, by saṃyama on that which exists for itself, knowledge of that thing which is the Puruṣa arises. Why is Patanjali saying that? This is very heavily loaded. Can you cognize the Puruṣa? Can you imagine the Puruṣa? Does anybody want to answer?
No.
You cannot, right? Because by it is ever the subject. Subject can never be the object. So you cannot imagine the Puruṣa. So how do you imagine the Puruṣa? By negating anything that is not the Puruṣa. By saṃyama on that which exists for itself, the mind, you come to know that the mind serves something else. And by that knowledge, you understand there is something distinct that is me, the subject, which is watching all that. Okay? Okay. So there's transition happening from conceptual knowledge to existential knowledge. Parartha saṃyama, there are two words he uses. Parartatvat means it exists for another. So the buddhi exists for another. Parartha saṃyama means ordinary meditation used to focus on an object, a sound, a concept to achieve a result, peace, power, clarity, whatever it is. Then swartha saṃyama, the act of turning the consciousness away from the service, the thoughts, towards the existence of the seer. You can't see the seer, but it is the analysis, who is observing all this? That analysis, that is called swartha saṃyama. There are thoughts in the mind. The thoughts are not about the Puruṣa, because Puruṣa has no form. That is the subject. It can never be the object. So swartha saṃyama is understanding, the mind is not the Puruṣa. It's in Vedanta, for those who've studied, it's called neti neti. So all this is not it. Na iti, not this, not this. And the next question is, how can you perform saṃyama on the Puruṣa? It is performed on the concept neti neti, that Puruṣa is distinct from experience, because experience is the subject. Object of saṃyama is a refined buddhi vritti. I am the seer distinct from the seen. So Vachaspati Mishra here clarifies. He says, Puruṣa cannot be a literal object of saṃyama, because subject itself cannot serve as an object. Instead, he explains that the yogi performs saṃyama on the purest reflection of the Puruṣa in the sattva. By focusing on the swartha, that is consciousness that does not depend on anything else for its existence, the false identifications with the mind's utility interest, which is para-artha, for the purpose of something else, drops away. So that is what is called the swartha saṃyamat, by performing analysis on the refined buddhi vritti, that there is something watching that mind. That is the saṃyama. Okay? So moving from the dependent, the buddhi is dependent, intellect is dependent. It's a dependent entity. The independent entity is Puruṣa. So purpose of the buddhi, we saw that in the second chapter. Does anybody know what does the prakriti exist for? We've seen that in the second chapter. What is the buddhi is part of the prakriti, right? The intellect is part of the Prakriti. The mind is part of the Prakriti. What does it exist for? Patanjali says, Parartatvat. It serves something else, which is the seer. But what's the function of Prakriti? Anybody wants to say?
To like reflect the Puruṣa, the consciousness, so we can know, we can have self-knowledge.
Yes. Yeah. There are two things Patanjali mentions. Prakasha kriya sthitishilam bhutendriyatmakam bhoga pavargatam drishyam. It provides bhoga and apavarga. Bhoga is experience, apavarga is liberation. So you can use the mind for getting experience of the world, pleasure, pain, everything. You don't want pain, you want the pleasure, but it's used to get experience. And also, what is the mind used for? For getting liberation, apavarga. Okay, the Puruṣa is the only entity that does not exist to serve something else. So now this question, so why are you're saying that Puruṣa is ever the subject? Can there be another Puruṣa seeing the subject, and then in which case the Puruṣa becomes an object? And there's so these questions are asked. All this we'll deal with in the 4th chapter. Patanjali gives thorough explanation. So if you are the subject and you need another subject to actually see you, then it creates infinite regress. To see that subject, you need another subject, all that. Or you can say, if you are doing this, there are all kinds of, this Swami Hariharananda gives all these examples. So in engineering, there's a concept of bootstrapping. So let's say there are two Puruṣas, and one Puruṣa sees the other Purusha, this Puruṣa sees this one. Then the problem is, if both are not seeing, there's no experience that's happening. So there are all these catches. So logically, they provide this is not happening. So for bootstrapped system, there are usually two stable states. It can be in any of the state. The closer it is to one state, after that, it'll go latch on to that state. Otherwise, it's at the 0-0 state where both don't see. So logically, it's not possible. The Puruṣa is always seeing. So the Patanjali systematically actually Swami Hariharananda in the commentary systematically refutes all this. We'll see in the 4th chapter. This is very relevant to the modern day AI consciousness question. Okay, so and then Vachaspati Mishra here says, for another parartha, nature of mind, every thought you have is parartha. It exists to show you a world, to solve a problem, or to experience a feeling. The mind is a tool. It has no value of its own. It's a tool used to serve the Puruṣa. It's called, the Puruṣa is called Sat. It just means existence. There's no qualification. It exists for its own sake. Sat, Chit, Anandam. These are not the properties. This is the nature. There's a difference. The nature of the Puruṣa is Sat, existence. Sat means existence. Chit means consciousness. It is conscious. Ananda is bliss. This is the nature of the Puruṣa. These are not the properties. There's no attributes of the Puruṣa. This is just the nature is these three. It is existence, consciousness, bliss. So Puruṣa is that which exists for, that's why it's called Swartha Saṃyama. Swartha means for its own sake. It doesn't have to serve anything. The mind exists for the sake of something else. Is this point clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Atyanta asamkirna, absolutely distinct. What we call ordinary experience is actually a confusion between the luminosity of the Puruṣa and the activity of the buddhi. Why does this confusion happen? Pratyaya avishesha means not avishesha, not distinct. Confusion or absence of distinction happens in cognition. That is why when you slow down the mind with meditation, things are much clearer. There is a drastic shift in perception from parartha to swartha, becoming engrossed in the movie to becoming aware of the projector light. That is the inward turn that's happening in the sutra. So let us take a look at, so this is going more into the Vedantic realm, but I will tell you the story anyway. Okay, this is a famous story, King Janaka story. I think this comes in one of the Puranas. This is a story of King Janaka and Rishi Ashtavakra. You know Ashtavakra? He has Ashtavakram, 8 crooked points in his body. He is shown, depicted as being with 8 deformities in his body. The narrative focuses on the details of the king's dream and the resulting profound realization. So King Janaka, the powerful and enlightened ruler of Mithila, was one day resting on a bed of soft silk in his magnificent palace. He was surrounded by cool breeze, and gentle, and the presence of guards. He was secure, so he went into a deep and heavy sleep. And as he slept, he went into a dream. In the dream, he didn't realize he was dreaming, and he was just sleeping on the bed. Suddenly, there was a big siren, and he woke up with a start. This is all happening in the dream. He woke up with a start, and there's a neighboring king is trying to invade. Suddenly, they have crept, and the guards have raised the alarm. So he gets ready for battle, puts on his battle gear, and he fights the battle. And he loses miserably in the battle. And he runs away from the battlefield. He was roaming like a wretched beggar, his body covered in rags, his stomach hollow with hunger, and for days he had not eaten. He had wandered miles under the scorching sun, finding only the ground and empty houses, dry ground and empty houses. He approached a village. Finally, he saw a sign of hope. There was a charity kitchen distributing a meager portion of the called kanji, which is rice gruel, to the poor people. Janaka lined up with his cracked, he had an earthenware bowl. His heart pounded as his turn approached. He was so eager to eat that. The kitchen master ladled a small amount of the food into his hand. It was the only sustenance he had even seen in days, not even eaten. He had not eaten anything. Overwhelmed with gratitude and desperation, Janaka carefully turned away from the crowd and carrying his bowl to a secluded corner where he thought he could eat in peace. As he was about to raise the bowl to his lips, a hawk swooped from the sky and knocked off the bowl. It was spilled down. And then he was about to pick that up and eat, and then a stray dog rushed in. The aggressive dog growled at him and quickly consumed the remaining mess on the ground. Janaka could only salvage one small bite. The final act of loss and his utter helplessness broke him. The deep pain of hunger and the ultimate despair forced a piercing, loud scream from his throat. And at that time, he woke up from that dream. Janaka jumped up from the soft bed, his heart pounding. And it was so vivid that he thought it was reality. But he realized he was safe in his chamber, surrounded by the familiar luxury and the anxious faces of the guards. His breath was ragged. He was shaken to the core. He looked around at his mind, around at the palace, and then at his own hands. He uttered what had happened. So this kind of experience, he had never had such an experience, such a vivid dream. And then he talked to all the wise people in the kingdom or sages in his court to give him a satisfactory answer. Which is real? It seemed so real. Is there some element of truth to that? Months passed in the state of, he had an existential crisis. None of the wise people could give him a satisfactory answer. Months passed in this state. And then one day, the young enlightened sage, Ashtavakra, arrived. So Ashtavakra is shown like this, but in reality, he has the deformities in the body are not shown, but this is Ashtavakra. And king, he asked, which is real, that or this life? The dream was so real. I felt pain, I felt thirst, I felt hunger, my stomach was hurting. Which is real? Then Ashtavakra said, O king, neither that is real, nor this is real. When you were a beggar in your dream, this palace, this body, and being a king had absolutely no existence for you. When you are awake and seated in this palace, that beggar, that hunger, the dog, they don't exist. Both conditions, since both conditions are temporary and vanish, neither can be considered real. Do you see the meaning? The mind, the state, that for something to be the subject, it should be changeless. Would you agree with me? There's a logic to this, because if something is changing, it cannot observe something else which is changing, right? The logic is that if there's a change, there needs to be another subject to see the change. The fact that you're saying there's a change, therefore the subject should be changeless. Would you agree with me? Because we saw there cannot be many subjects. Because to have the subject cannot change, because you need something constant to see the mind which is changing all the other things which are changing. The subject therefore has to be fixed. If you can say, oh, why can't I have a changing subject and see the mind which is always, mind is violently changing all the time. You agree with that? Why can't I have a changing consciousness to see a changing mind? You cannot, because the change, in order to see the change, you need another entity to see the change. Therefore, the Puruṣa or the subject is non-changing. What does this show? This says that your life as you know it doesn't exist in the dream state. Therefore, this is a profound statement. This is actually not in the yoga realm, it's in the Vedanta. Since you guys asked about this Maya and all that, I'm bringing this story here. So don't get confused, but Ashtavakra says, even this existence is not real. It may have a higher order of reality. You may say my current thing is in vivid technicolor, whereas the dream is little blurry. But even Ashtavakra, the Janaka said, even the dream was so real. Sometimes you can have such a realistic looking dream. So Ashtavakra says it may be a higher order of reality, but even that is not real. So Ashtavakra, the only thing that was real in both states was you, the consciousness. You were the one witnessing the hunger, the hawk, the dog of the dream. You are now the one witnessing the palace and the comfort of the waking state. The dream came and went. In the waking state has come, and one day it will go. But you, the consciousness that witnesses it all, do not change. You are the only truth. With this answer, Janaka's confusion was instantly dispelled. Do you see this important logic? This consciousness which is seeing everything, that is the only permanent thing. Because why is even the life we know is not real? Because there's no difference from a dream. It's just the order of reality. That's how Vedanta says this. It is not permanent. It's anything that is not permanent, it puts it to the lower order of reality. Puruṣa is the only permanent thing. Okay, this is slightly Vedantic, but it kind of gives you the logic. And in 4th chapter, we'll get a taste for this logic, as Patañjali refutes. Patañjali is not Vedantic, he's sticking to yoga, but he refutes other schools of Buddhism. He says, no, there is a certain Puruṣa and the Prakriti. Some schools of Buddhism say, there is a changing consciousness and everything, this world is not real and all that kind of things. So Patanjali says that is not true. So how does Vedanta Yoga confirm the persistence of the Puruṣa? How does it continue to exist? Because for this reason, if it changes, let's say it switches off, then it switches on. Who is there to see that it has switched on and off? So it is not the ultimate subject. There has to be an ultimate subject. If you say there's another thing which says this is switched on and off, then it creates an infinite regress, which you can't have. So that is the reason. Okay. So anyway, let's move on to, we've already spent a lot of time. Okay. Then comes a very, very important sutra. So I may go 5 minutes over the time because we have a lot to cover today. Tata Prātibha Shravana Vedana Darsha Svadavarta Jayante. Intuitive perceptions. This is a very beautiful sutra. It says, from that, tataha means, so it's an important thing. See, sutra, what did I say? Sutra means a suture. It's a thread. It means all these pearls are strung on this thread, which means the one pearl has the meaning which is continuity from the previous one. Tataha, so sutra itself, a flow in there, flow of ideas. Tataha, from that, from what? From the distinction between the sattva, which is the mind. Sattva refers to the finest aspect of the mind. Usually they say it is the intellect. Intellect is the greatest thing in the mind. And then there is, of course, the chitta, which is on the medium on which everything is projected. So the distinction between, from the distinction between sattva and Puruṣa, what arises? Prātibha, spontaneous intuition. And what else? Tataha, Shravana, Vedana, Adarsha, Asvada, Varta, Jayante. From this arise what? Shravanam is hearing, spontaneous, divine or transcendental hearing, then Vedana, feeling, then Adarsha, great sight into, we'll see some examples. Then Swad means in Hindi, for those who know, Swad means taste. Swad means, remember what is the difference between a and a? Can anybody tell me? Aswad means what and aswad means what? Swad is taste.
Like one's negation and one's like a reverent, like, wow.
Yeah, exactly. Means negation. Means it is a great quality. Aswad means great taste. Vata, smelling, all these are born. So intuitive perceptions are born. Prātibha and the 5 transcendental senses. Prātibha means pratibhati iti pratibham. So that which flashes, that's why you say a flash of insight. It is meaning it's higher intuition, spontaneous illumination. All these come during meditation. Tataha. And when you start knowing that this is when it happens. This is when it happens. This pratibha arises. When you are not the mind, when you get that thing, then you get all these spontaneous flashes of intuition. It is a spontaneous, immediate form of knowledge that transcends the sequential processing of the intellect. Later, Patanjali say, Tarakam, it is transcendental, it's non-linear. That's how meditation works. The yogi with Prātibha can have immediate total knowledge about the past, present, and future and invisible thing. Prātibha is the foundational power. This sutra has to be read in conjunction with the next, which we will see. The siddhis becoming obstacles. Te samada upasarga vyuttane siddhayaha. These powers are obstacles to samadhi. Te samada upasarga, which means impediments, obstacles, troubles. Vyuttane means in this outward turned, outgoing world. Vyuttanam means Vyuttana nirodha samskaryo abhibhava pradurbhavo nirodakshana chittanvayo nirodha parinamaha. Remember the 2 samskaras during meditation, the mechanics of meditation. Outgoing samskara, ingoing. So Vyuttana means in this outgoing world, in this worldly realm, These are considered siddhis or perfections or superpowers. These powers are obstacles to samadhi, but they are perfections or siddhis in the worldly state. That's what it's saying. This sutra is a pivot point. Patanjali has spent considerable time detailing the mechanics of saṃyama, right? And he's listing various supernormal powers, siddhis, a yogi can attain. He now abruptly halts the exposition to issue a severe warning about these powers. What's he saying? Temptation and fascination, these are very seductive. Yogi may become fascinated by their own abilities, seeking the thrill of magic over the quiet work of liberation. Dissipation of focus. Vyasa's commentary notes that the moment a power manifests, it can generate joy, wonder, or pride. This immediate emotion reaction dissipates the intense calm and clarity needed for the highest meditation, causing the mind to fluctuate again. And the worst thing about the siddhis is it strengthens the ego. The final barrier to liberation is the subtle sense of I. Attaining supernormal powers can instantly revive and strengthen this ego. Okay, so transcending the subtle sense of I is what is needed for liberation, but these powers can pull you back. Then, okay, but he then again continues with the other powers. Parakaya pravesha, entering another's body. Look at the kind of things. It's looking like science fiction, right? Like Star Trek, they disappear from here, appear somewhere. Like that, Patanjali is saying, your subtle body can enter another person's body, physical body. Your subtle body from here can go, and if there's a dead person, we'll see a story soon, it can enter that body and make that come alive. Bandhakarana shaitilyat prachara samvedanacha chittasya para sharira veshaha. Okay. Bandhakarana shaitilyat. Shaitilyam means literally cooling down. Here it means by loosening. The bandha karana means the cause of bondage. Bandha is bondage, karanam is cause. By loosening the cause of bondage, and prachara samvedanacha, the path, prachara is pathways, and knowing samvedanat means knowing very well, and knowing the pathways of the mind very well, how the mind works, the mind can enter the body of another. Parasharira aveshaha means avesham, it means entering. Parasharira means another person's body. Okay. Being restless by nature, the mind gets tied up with the body on account of the latent impressions of previous actions. Remember, the three are separate. What are the three parts of the body? Anybody?
The gross, subtle, and seed.
Yes. So the gross body is the physical body. The mind belongs to the subtle body. It's different. But the mind gets tied up with the physical body on account of latent impressions of previous actions. Through the power of concentration, the ties created by the previous actions become loosened, and the movements of the mind are known. When the bonds of previous action become weak and the movements of the mind are known, the yogi can withdraw the mind from his or her own body and project it into another's body. The example given is when a queen bee flies, all bees follow it. When it settles down, others do the same. So the sense energies, indriyas, they follow the mind wherever, as it enters the other body. In the Bhagavad Gītā also, Shotram chakshus parshanam cha rasanam granam eva cha adhishtayam vishayan upasevate, and utkramantam samvapi, like a wind carrying away everything. So the mind just pulls everything and just takes it away. Vayurgandhani vashayat, it says shotram chakshus parshanam cha rasanam granam eva cha adhishtayam anashtayam vishayan upasevate. So the whole mind just carries all this and it goes away into another body. Okay, so that is the okay. So the three sthula shariram, sukshma shariram, karana shariram, the gross body, subtle body, and the causal body. That is our three bodies. Now we will see a story of Adi Shankaracharya. I've kind of told this story earlier. Now we will see that in detail. This is a very famous story. This narrative, it comes in Shankara Digvijaya. It's a life narrative detailing the life of the great sage Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya, some people say, he is the greatest philosopher in recent modern times, in the last 2500 years or so, because of his logic that he used. And in those days, there were different philosophies in India: Buddhism, Jainism, all those, and even within the Sanatana Dharma, or what's loosely called Hinduism, there were so many philosophies. Shankara went and established the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta exactly as it had been in the Vedas all over India. And he was a great debater. He had such a brilliant mind. He just lived up to 30. And very quickly he came. So the story goes that his parents, they wanted a child. So they prayed to Lord Shiva. And then somebody came and gave the couple a fruit or something. And then he said, well, you can choose two things. You can wish for a child who will live a very short life, but he'll be the greatest intellectual in the world. Or you can ask for a child who lives a long time, but he'll be an ordinary person. The couple and the other person also said, this person will have Shiva. It's like a incarnation of Shiva. So they chose the former, which is a child extremely brilliant with a small lifespan. That is Shankaracharya. That is just it's a legend. Okay, so the challenge and the debate. Adi Shankara, the young and brilliant exponent of Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta is probably almost the same as in the Vedas. It's the most purest interpretation of the Vedas. So he was traveling throughout India, engaging other philosophers in debate. His goal was to establish the non-dual truth. He arrived at the ashram of Mandana Mishra, the greatest scholar of Karma Mimamsa school, which emphasizes ritualistic action. Remember the three pairs of sisters I talked to you about? The two pairs, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Yoga, Sankhya, they didn't quarrel. But Purva Mimamsa and Vedanta, they quarreled because the ritualistic actions, they trap you to the worldly realms. You can go to heavens, but again you come back. Tetam bhuktva swargalokam vishalam shine punye martyalokam vishanti. So you go to heavens and you fall back. So the Mandana Mishra was a great scholar of karma and mimamsa. So they entered a debate, Shankaracharya and Mandana Mishra. And the Mandana Mishra said the loser should adopt the others' philosophy and lifestyle. Shankaracharya agreed. After many days, Shankara, through logic and command of the scriptures, was about to win. At this point, Mandana Mishra's wife, a brilliant and virtuous lady, her name was Bharati. She is considered the incarnation of goddess Saraswati. She declared, a husband and wife are one entity. My husband is only half of the challenge. You must also defeat me in the debate. So Shankaracharya, he agreed. Then Bharati knew she could not defeat him on logic or Vedanta. She chose a field that Shankaracharya, who was a lifelong brahmachari or a celibate, was utterly ignorant of because he didn't have a family. So, oh sage, she told him, she smiled and told, you know the absolute truth. You have the experience, but do you have the experience of the whole truth? You are an ascetic who has never known love, desire, or family. Tell me about Kama Shastra, the science of love and desire. Describe to me the 64 accomplishments of a refined worldly life. So this is all about family, desire to have a family, everything. Shankara was stunned. He was a perfect ascetic. To answer based on experience was impossible. To give an answer from text as someone who doesn't understand, who as someone who understands but doesn't know, would be a fraud, and she would instantly expose. He could not answer. He told her, give me 1 month. So, and Bharati taunted him further, saying, person who does not understand human desire and emotion cannot debate a householder scholar on the nature of material existence, which is samsara. Since you are celibate and ignorant, I ask you to get experience. Your true master should know of all life experience and then renounce them. Shankaracharya understood the gravity. So he asked for a month, leaving Mandana Mishra's ashram. He was walking back to where he was staying. At that moment, there was news that the king of the neighboring kingdom had passed away. That gave Shankaracharya an idea. So what does he do? He sat in meditation and he slackened the cause of bondage, Chaitanya, and he was able to dissociate from his body and enter the body of the king. And before he did that, he went to a cave and he told his disciples to watch over his body and not let anybody enter the cave. And in the neighboring kingdom, the queen was grieving for the death of the king. And suddenly the king woke up. They were going to, cremate him. And then he woke up from the cremation pyre before it was set alight. And he suddenly sat up, gasping. His eyes, which were glazed in death, now shone with brilliant, unfamiliar light. Nobody could understand the brilliance in his eyes. The entire palace celebrated, and this king's name was Amaruka. So Shankaracharya lived in his body for a month. He experienced every pleasure of the senses, every complication of desires, the governance of the kingdom, and the dynamics of love and family. As king, he also wrote some texts on Kama Shastra based on first-hand experience. Then he, just at the end of the month, he got away from the body, and the king fell dead. So again, there was sobbing in the kingdom, but he goes back in his Shankaracharya's body, and he debates Bharati, and he emerges victorious. And both Bharati and Mandana Mishra became his disciples. So this is Parakaya Pravesha. Okay, that's the story. Next, we go to prana. So I'll take a little time because we have to cover a few sutras. Okay. Udana Jayat Jalapanka Kantakadishpasanga Ukrantischa. By mastering the prana vayu called Udana, one does not touch water. You can levitate. So it's levitation by mastery over the Udana vayu. You can levitate over Udana Jayat by mastery over Udana. Jalam, water. You can walk over water. Panka, mud, without getting your feet muddy. Kantaka, thorns. Adishu, etc. Asanga, without coming in contact with them. Ukranti, you can levitate over them. So Patanjali says that. So prana. Now we come to prana. There one more sutra on prana. So Patanjali, so there are different prana vayus. So what are the 5 prana vayus? Prana is one. Prana splits, just for base of administration, it splits into 5. Prana, Udana, Prana, Apana, Udana, Pyana, Samana. Prana is born of the Atma. Like a man and his or her shadow, or man or woman and his or her shadow, the self, that is the Puruṣa and Prana, are inseparable. Prana enters the body at birth, that the desires of the mind continuing from past lives may be fulfilled. Prana provides the continuity between our present and past lives. Okay. So what are these 5 pranas? Prana vayu governs. So the one prana divides itself into 5. It's only one prana. For administration, it says, okay, I will split myself into 5 forms and take care of different things. What are the different things? When they treat you in acupuncture, the chi, which they're normalizing, that is the prana. And in Ayurveda, that's what they try to normalize. The prana, it's all the natural systems of ancient days. They worked on the prana, the body's life force. Prana vayu governs intake, the breathing in, receiving energy, taking in impressions through the senses. Apana vayu governs downward and outward movement, elimination, urination, menstruation, childbirth, and grounding. Samana vayu governs digestion. One more sutra, samana jayat jwalanam. It is the fire, it's assimilation, metabolism, and also it balances it, just the heat throughout the body. So samana, by mastery over the samana, will see your body shines because of the radiance of the fire. Then vyana vayu governs circulation and distribution throughout the body. So you see, vyana, circulation, apana, elimination, downward movement. Then samana is the fire, right? And udana vayu governs upward movement, expression, speech, enthusiasm, and spiritual ascent. So these are the 5 vayus. So prana is the life force that draws nourishment. Apana is a force that helps the body release what is no longer needed. Samana, it takes what we receive, food, breath, and helps it convert it into usable energy. Vyana spreads prana everywhere, coordinating movement, circulation, nerve impulses, and the integration of the whole system. Udana is the force behind speaking, feeling uplifted, eventually the upward movement of consciousness. In fact, for some of the balancing levitation poses in asana practice, people tap into this udana, the udana vayu. Okay. And I'm not going to talk about much this in detail. To channel the prana, we use the bandhas, the 3 common bandhas: Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, and Jalandhara Bandha. Okay, to channel and focus the prana for great strength in pranayama and asana practice. Okay, Udana gives angalagam, lightness of the body. It is said that when the feeling of lightness you get in some asanas is due to Udana. It's a core component of Hatha Yoga. When you have that, it has the feelings in the mind or joy, uplift feelings, etc. In the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the first shloka on asanas is Hatasya pratamangatvam asanam purvamuchyate kuryat tadasanam stairyam arogyam changalagavam. Angalagavam, lightness of the body, that comes by the practice of asanas. So a famous Upanishad, I just wanted to mention that, where this is talked about in detail, is Prashna Upanishad. There are 6 questions to sage Pipalada by 6 of his disciples. So beautiful questions. I'll give a taste for some of the questions. So Gurudev, one guy asks, his name is Kausalya Ashvalayana. From where is the prana born? How does it enter the body? How does it distribute itself? How does it depart at the time of death? How does it support what is external and internal? The Rishi Pipalada explains that prana is born from the Atma. It enters the physical body driven by the actions and desires of the mind. Once inside, it operates much like a master energy source, distributing power through specialized routing in a complex architecture. Okay, the 5 prana, apana, samana, vyana, udana. And then another person asks, Sauryayani Gargya, his name, he asks about consciousness and sleep. In a person, who is it that sleeps? Who stays awake? Who sees dreams? Who experiences happiness? So the Rishi says, during sleep, all the sensory organs withdraw and are merged into the mind. The senses are inactive. Person does not hear, see, or speak. However, the Rishi explains, the fires of prana remain fully awake, keeping the biological system functioning. It is the Atma that experiences the dream during the dream state. It is the Atma that experiences the profound, unalloyed happiness of a deep, dreamless sleep. Okay, so in the for those who remember Puranjana Upakyanam, does any of you remember that? So those who remember that, do you know who what character is embodied by the Puranjana in the of prana, embodiment of prana in the Puranjana Upakyanam? Anybody wants to say? So if you see the Puranjana Upakyana, can now anybody say who, what represents the prana here? All these are parts of the subtle body. This is the Ahankara, this is the Atma, this is the Buddhi, the beautiful lady, this is the mind, Manaha, and then the Karmendriyas and Jnanendriyas. What represents the prana?
I think it was the serpent.
Yeah, five-headed serpent. Yeah, it comes and takes part in the battle also. I don't have that slide, but yeah, that's the serpent. That's a protector. It protects the body. That's why you have to balance the prana. Prana, it's all about prana. Your health is all about prana. Then radiance by mastery over samana vayu. Samana jayat jvalanam. By mastering samana, one attains radiance, a blazing aura. Samana has origins near the navel. Samana flows strongly with the help of the Jatar Agni. It's like a furnace, the fire. That's why you have to kindle the body's fire. So asanas that kindle the body's fire in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, they talk about Paschimottanasana and also Mayurasana. These are two asanas that kindle the fire. Paschimottanasana, the foremost among asanas, it reverses the breath flow, kindles the fire of the stomach. It says that in Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Okay. Then Shrotra-kashayo sambandha samyamat divyam shrotram. By performing saṃyama on the relationship between the ear and the space, divine hearing is obtained. Shrotra akashayo. The shrotra is refers to the organ of hearing. Here it refers to the subtle perception behind hearing. Shrotra akashayo means of these two. By performing saṃyama on these two, what two? Akasha is space, on the relationship between the ear and space, or the organ of hearing and space. Sambandha samyamat. Sambandham is relationship. Samyamat, on saṃyama. Divyam shrotram, divine hearing is obtained. Divyam means divine. You obtain divine hearing. The organ of hearing is situated in the ear cavity, and this interacts with the medium of space, akasha, which is the fundamental elemental basis for sound. Space has only one tanmatra, that is sound. Remember the different tanmatras we saw in the first chapter? So the unique tanmatra to actually space has only one. Earth has all the properties. It has sound, touch, form, flavor, and odor. Water has 4, fire has 3, air has 2, touch and sound. Space has only one, the sound tanmatra. Okay, so when a yogi performs saṃyama on the precise relationship between the physical ear and akasha, which is space, the spatial limitations of the physical ear are removed. This is what Swami Hariharananda says. And the yogi attains divine hearing. they gain the ability to hear sounds that are subtle, concealed, or at a great distance. Divine hearing was also mentioned previously in 3.36. Remember? Shravanam. Tata Prātibha Shravana Vedana Darsha. So why is it mentioned again here? In Sutra 3.36, we just saw that a few minutes ago. Divine hearing spontaneously arises because the yogi is performing saṃyama purely on the nature of the Puruṣa. And here, the divine hearing is a deliberately cultivated power achieved by pointing the focus outward toward the mechanics of the Prakriti, that is the physical air and the element of space. Okay, so sometimes saṃyama on a certain thing can be obtained by multiple ways. Previously, Lena also asked me about knowledge of past lives. You can attain in different ways. Okay, so it's 8:31. We'll stop here.